Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to grow your firm by providing virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. I'm very excited for today's guest, although I'm a little afraid this might be our shortest podcast based on the topic. So hopefully Monica will surprise me in that sense. We are joined today by Monica Parkin, who is the author of the book Overcoming Awkward, The Introvert's Guide to Marketing, Network, and Sales. So very excited to talk to her about what it's like to be an introvert in a very extroverted world. Before we jump over to her and let her do a full introduction, I'm joined once again by Adam Hale. So welcome to the show, Adam.
Hey, everybody. I'm looking forward to hearing Jamie overcome his awkward introduction there.
Thank you. All right, Monica, your turn for just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your book and kind of how you got into this path.
Yeah, thanks. I'll try not to be too awkward and make sure we get some talking time, not too much dead airspace. But yeah, Monica Parkin, author of Overcoming Awkward, The Introvert's Guide to Networking, Marketing, and Sales. I'm actually a mortgage broker by trade. When I first went into the industry, I didn't get the memo. I thought that I could just work from home and email people and call them and didn't have to go anywhere or, build a book of business, that would just be handed to me. So I was pretty surprised when I went to the office the first day and asked for my first client. They're like, yeah, you're gonna have to go out and find that client yourself. So that was sort of the beginning of this journey to overcome awkward. So last year in the pandemic, I was just sitting around and saw this ad for a 30-day book writing challenge. And I thought, wow, I don't have to commute. I'm saving an hour off of my day. I can do this. And the first question in that challenge was, what's something you've overcome? And so for me, it was this whole introvertedness. And there was a book 30 days later, and here we are.
Wow, 30 days. That's impressive.
Yeah, it was really cool. They send you a little assignment every day. So the first day was like, what's the thing? The next day is, where's your table of contents? Like every day just built on the next. And it was just, half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening. And I was really surprised. But yeah, at the end of 30 days, there was all the editing and the proofing and, fixing and changing things around still had to happen. But the bones of it was there.
So
yeah.
I imagine in that type of process and probably the way it's set up, there's a lot of learning and self-learning along the way. I'm sure what you imagined it would sound like or look like would probably different than what it actually ended up with. So can you give an example of something you learned through this writing process?
Yeah. So yeah, A, it was completely different than what I expected it to look like. And B, one of the things I learned is for years I've tried to write a book and I just can't stick with it. Like I just couldn't. And, when I told the kids I was doing this 30-day thing, because I may or may not have some ADHD, my kid was like, Mom, 30 days, that's the perfect amount of time for you to hyperfixate on something. Like you can just completely fixate on this, get it done. And I figured out that's something that works really well for me, is like digging deep into something, getting really excited about it, and then, okay, it's done, I'm going to put it away. But one of the things they did is this thing called a Pomodoro method, where you just write for 30 minutes at a time. You put on some music and you just write, you don't edit, you just basically just vomit out whatever words you can come up with. And the first few days it was really hard. After I got going though, as soon as I put the music on, I just the words would just start to flow. And I still use that technique now a year later.
Very cool. Yeah, no, that's interesting. So what about in terms of, the content of the book, whenever you had to go back and really take inventory of the things that you did to overcome, being an introvert, if you will, in a networking and a people business, what are some of the things that you really didn't realize, I guess, maybe while you were going through the process yourself, whenever you sat down and thought about it? What were some of the big key takeaways
Yeah,
there?
because it really is. You are kind of peeling back that onion as you write and as you edit and you go through. One of the things I really didn't realize till afterwards, until I started doing some podcasts and talking to people about this, is the authenticity piece. That I didn't realize was such a big part of actually networking and marketing, is just being you, being your authentic self. And even after I wrote the book, like I got pretty vulnerable in parts of it. And that was the feedback from people, is we loved how vulnerable you got. Like, I feel this way too. And I love that you just put your real self out there. And for me, just moving forward, marketing myself and looking back, that was a big piece of it. Because when we're like in the beginning, when I was trying to be this, I have a story in the book about going to this Chamber of Commerce meeting and being absolutely terrified, walking into the meeting, seeing all the people, turn around, going back and sitting in my car and trying to figure out how am I going to get out of this stupid thing, right? And my coworker shows up and I'm like, great, I can't even say I'm sick. She's here now. I got to go in. But I did the thing that I was supposed to do. I walked around, I shook everyone's hand, I gave them my card, I talked about mortgages, but I didn't make any authentic connections. Like, I wasn't me. And I got home and I had all these business cards in my hand, and I'm looking at these cards and I'm like, I don't know, I just throw them in the fire. Like, what am I going to do with these things? And then I'm like, crap, if I'm throwing their cards in the fire, like, that means they're all going home and throwing out my cards too. Like, nothing that I did that day actually grew my business. I was just like a robot, shaking hands and talking about myself. And that was a big moment for me when I realized, like, this thing that I've been taught to do, it's not actually growing my business. It's just showing up as this blank person, and I need to actually show up as a real person.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
So what's that look like?
Yeah, what's that look like? For me, it looks like let your inner weirdo shine, Like, I just am me now. Like, I'm this, actually, you see these pictures behind me, the chicken and the cow. Like, I live on a farm, I got goats and chickens, and sometimes they'll be part of my posts or whatever, or, I'm just authentic me. Like, I'm not, and when I meet people, I don't talk about me and what I can do for you, and this is what I do for a living, and take my card. It's like asking questions about other people, like, why are you here? What made you want to do this business? What can you offer? And who can I connect you to? It's adding value to other people. And one thing I've figured out is people notice people who notice them. So simple little things like giving someone else a shout out, or sharing their post, or saying, hey, I saw you the other day, that was great. Or, it's bringing that sense of community into everything you do, and how can I elevate other people? And it just naturally, there's that feeling of reciprocity that happens, and it amplifies your own business.
Yeah, it's really funny having you tell that story, because I remember being a first-year accountant right out of college, and I'm not an introvert by any means. I'm an extrovert. So I'm like, oh, yeah, I've got this networking thing down. But I had a very similar experience where I walk into a hotel ballroom, and I'm talking to people, and I'm meeting people, and I'm having a great time. And then I go back, same thing, look at all the cards I got, and I'm like, okay, who's this again? And who am I supposed to reach out to? And kind of the next steps. And so I think I had a very similar experience, and just like it took me 4, 5, 6 times to go into those events to be like, okay, what am I trying to get out of this, and how do you do it? So do you still recommend people going to those events and just asking different questions, or how do you approach that?
Well, both. I think there's value in those events. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely value, but I think those are the places, those events are where you now connect with people that you've already built a relationship. And I think you build the relationships outside of those events, and then you really solidify them when you see those people at those places. What I found, at least for me as an introvert, maybe it's different as an extrovert, but those relationships are built by sitting on little committees, where you got 4 or 5 people in a room and you're trying to solve a puzzle together, you're working on a fundraiser, whatever the thing is. You really get to know other people's personalities, they get to know yours. You're like, there's a sense of camaraderie, volunteering, like just doing all those other things. Is where you build those relationships one-on-one, and then you solidify them when you run back into those people at those events, right? And that's where you connect, and you can rehash what's working and what's not. And
So getting involved is
totally
what I hear, right?
Getting involved, right? Like for my business is sort of the real estate business, but I use this analogy sometimes when I'm talking to people or doing a presentation. But so if I'm living in this beautiful house, right, I got this great business, it's all shiny and clean, my house is beautiful, my yard's beautiful, everything looks amazing. If I look across the street and my neighbor's yard looks like trash, or the community's falling down, like the value of my house will go down, my property value will go down. So it doesn't matter how good my business is, if my community's not thriving, my industry's not thriving, everyone else around me isn't thriving, if I'm not contributing to it, my business is eventually not going to thrive. Like, it is a group project. We're all part of that same community.
Yeah, So well said. I mean, so how would you, I mean, especially as an introvert though, I mean, even that probably is a little bit scary, right? Like volunteering for a small committee or getting into a group and doing those kind of things. I mean, obviously the smaller number helps, and not only with connection, but still you have to put yourself out there and volunteer to do
Yeah.
those kind of things. So as an introvert, any kind of tips or tricks on how to
Yeah,
get
well,
around
first
that?
of all, I think it helps to pick something you're passionate about, right? Like to be honest, my kids all play hockey, but I'm not super excited about hockey. So I tried to volunteer as a hockey manager one year, and like I didn't do a great job because I wasn't real excited to get up at 6 in the morning, and I wasn't like it just wasn't my thing, and so it actually probably backfired on me. It probably didn't turn out to be a good networking thing for me because I wasn't showing up in the way that I wanted to show up. On the other hand, I'm this total little tech geek, and so the other kids got a robotics team. Well, I was at every tournament, and I like pick something that you're passionate about, pick something you can do a good job at. And then the other thing I tell people is because you see people sometimes they come in and they're self-employed or they're trying to network, and they join every committee, they volunteer for every single thing. They overextend themselves, they can't do a good job, and it actually reflects really poorly on them, and it has the opposite effect of having a negative impact on their business rather than a positive one. So I would say, pick something you're really excited about because you're going to want to go and show up. Start small, make sure you can manage it, and then just slowly add on to that, or maybe mix it up through the year.
I also think this goes down the path of which we talk a lot about is picking a vertical when it comes to sales and marketing, comes to your business, because I think if you try to be everything to everyone when it comes to networking and marketing, then how do you know where to go? How do you know who to talk to? Because like I said, when I was first out of college, I went to those events and they were lost relationships. But once I kind of got into a vertical, and when I was at Grant Thornton, that was restaurants. And once I started just talking to restaurant people and just working with restaurant people, I started seeing the same people over and over again. And like you said, getting more comfortable. And now that I'm at Summit, obviously we have a vertical as well. And I go to a lot of events, and I very rarely go to an event where I don't know at least 5, 6, 7 people, and that makes it way more comfortable. So I think having that passion and that vertical really makes it easier to choose the events you could go to, because if it wasn't for that, I could go to a different event every night. There's something going on every night somewhere where I could go network with people.
Yeah, and at that point you're just throwing cards at a wall and none of them are sticking, right? Like you got to have that a little bit of a narrow focus, and then you can always expand out from there. And yeah, choosing stuff you're excited about. For me, like I said, I'm a crazy farm lady, and so actually a lot of my business in the beginning, so here's the story. I would often post pictures of me and my little goats on Instagram or whatever. So one day I'd take the little goats to the vet and drop them off, and I come back an hour later and they're like, Are you Mortgage Monica? Like 3 people came in here and asked if these are Mortgage Monica's goats. Like someone said, I know that's butterscotch. That's Mortgage Monica's goat. And like I built a brand around like just these crazy little goats. But like that vertical that you're talking about, I started getting business from like agricultural business. Like, oh, we've got a farm property. We don't know how to finance that. And like, so people would connect me in that way. And so that was kind of my initial little branch, was all these farm and agricultural properties, and then it branched into something else and something else. But you start with that narrow focus, and then you move out as you go.
Yeah, I think what you were mentioning there is pretty important too. Is like personal brand, right? So as you mentioned there, Mortgage Monica, but everybody kind of associated you with the goats and things like that. Jamie and I have seen it with Jody, my partner. He started wearing Hawaiian shirts by happenstance, and he's kind of really transformed into this like character, if you will, that's become his brand, to always have a Hawaiian shirt on wherever he goes, and people remember him, people look for him, one, because they're pretty silly shirts, obviously, so he's easy to find in a crowd, but also because he's been able to create that brand for himself and make himself memorable. Which I think I witness it. I see it all the time. I hear it all the time. It's very noticeable. So I guess we need to we got to find our own chicken and goat. Jamie, is what I'm hearing.
It's a real thing, and there are people that I think about and I go, oh, that's so and so, and that like there's something about them that's really memorable for me. And I flew across the country a couple months ago to Toronto. I live in BC. It's like a 9-hour flight. I get there and someone's like, oh, you're the goat lady, right? Maybe it's not what you want to be known for, but the reality is like they remembered me, right? So, and that's the end goal. And then in terms of like talking about authenticity, one thing for me as an introvert, or maybe someone who's a little more awkward, if I'm trying to pretend to be someone I'm not, like if I've got this fake persona on, I got all these windows open in the background. Like I'm trying to remember details about myself that aren't true. I'm trying to manage things. I actually become less authentic. I become more awkward because I'm like, it's almost like when you're trying to lie and you're trying to remember all the details and you get them all screwed up. If I show up as my inauthentic self, I do the same thing, and I actually come across like not such a nice person because I'm trying to be someone I'm not.
No, I think that's a great point. And it also goes back to what you said about, making sure you choose something you're passionate about, because I also think, you're not always your true authentic self if you're talking about something you're not interested. Like, if I'm at a seminar about fixing engines, like that's something I'm not interested in. And yeah, I'll probably ask questions, but once I ask the question, I'm not listening because I honestly don't care about how to fix an engine. So I'm just going to move on to, okay, what's the right question to ask? But if you go to something about something you're passionate about, which everybody knows for me is basketball, or, I love learning about businesses. So if I'm something like at a place like that, I'm actually asking questions because I genuinely care. I want to know the answer. Like, you seem way more authentic, and you're a lot more fun to talk to when you're talking to someone who's that authentic.
Yeah. And you just hit on that listening piece too, and the question piece, right? Like someone told me, use your ear to mouth ratio. Like you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you talk in terms of, building connections. Like be that person that makes someone else feel heard, that like you really deeply listened, you ask good questions. And even in business, like when you're sitting down across the table from a client, if you don't ask the questions, you can't get the answers. If you don't have the answers, you can't solve the problem they have. And half of the equation is getting them in the door. But once they're in the door, like it's easier to keep a client and get referrals from them than it is to find a new one. So the other half of the equation is just being really good at what you do and asking really good questions so that you can actually solve the problem that they showed up for you to solve.
Yeah, I'm going to throw that back to Adam, because Adam is the best question asker I've ever witnessed and seen. So, Adam, is that your secret right there? Is that you're authentically caring?
Yeah, I mean, I just genuinely want to know more. I mean, it's just one of those rabbit hole things. And even if it's small engines, Jamie, it doesn't really matter. Like, as soon as I hear something, I'm usually just like, really? And then, it leads to another question. So I just like to absorb information and hear what other people have to say. I learn a lot from just listening to you, Monica, right now. Like I took a few notes and quoted you already a couple times. I mean, it's just, you learn a lot from talking to people. And so I'm just naturally a pretty inquisitive person. I do talk a lot though. So I don't know that I have the ratio down, but it's usually I'm asking questions. So, But yeah, no, that's great. I mean, so talking through personal brand and how to get into, smaller groups that you're passionate about, I think that lends a lot. And then, of course, that rolls right out into marketing, right? Because then once to Jamie's point, if you have an industry that you're passionate about or a thing that you're passionate about that's a little bit more focused, and you've already kind of cemented yourself in terms of your personal brand, it's easy to then roll out kind of a marketing strategy around that.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's just, it's like you just keep drilling down. And yeah, it's so much easier to roll out a marketing strategy once you have all that stuff nailed down. And it's a little bit of everything, right? It's building those relationships one-on-one, taking good care of your clients, taking good care of your community, getting involved, and elevating the people around you too. It's that whole going back to that people who notice them. Like if someone emails me and says, oh, I read your book, it was awesome, or I saw you the other day, you were great. Like I'm immediately stalking them, Googling, like, who is this person? Like, who are they? I want to learn more about them. I automatically like that person, right? You like people who like you. So, one strategy in the beginning that I didn't even realize was a strategy, I just did it naturally, is just giving people a shout out. Like, hey, I saw you the other day. That was fantastic. Or I read this blog post of yours, or I made a comment, and recognizing that was actually building relationships, because as soon as you notice someone, all of a sudden they're actually more curious about you and what you do, and now they want to support you, and not doing it for that reason, but it just organically flows out of that.
Yeah, I think that's natural for the introvert too. And I think that's I'm thinking my wife is an introvert, and it's funny, like we've moved several times, and she's probably one of the most approachable people in the world. And I think it's because she is an introvert. And so like we'll move somewhere and she'll have 25 friends before I've even met one person. It's like, that's crazy. I'm the extrovert. I'm the one talking to everybody, and yet everybody's approaching her. And I think it's because she has that listening, and she's authentic, and she really wants to know what you're talking about and cares about it, partly because she is an introvert, and it's more comfortable for her to listen and talk about the other person, where, you know, I think that us extroverts sometimes get on a path of we're talking about ourselves all the time. And so I think that's, you know, it's really interesting. I think it's a natural for the introvert to jump into that lane.
Yeah, when we look at studies between introverts and extroverts, like they both bring amazing skills to the table, and you really want to have both of them on your team. Like the extroverts have a really important role, and so do the introverts. But when they look at like the real winning piece for the introverts, it is that listening skill, that deep listening skill, like hearing the stuff that maybe someone else didn't hear, and bring that back to the group. Like, hey, did you notice this thing? And then being able to discuss that when you're talking about teams and things like that. That's sort of the value piece that they often add. And then for me, when I come home from an event, what I figured out is, you know, when I get home, I'm like, you know, I really want to get to know that person more, or that person really was memorable to me or made an impact to me. It's usually the person that really asked me some really good questions and really listened, and I felt really heard, as opposed to the person that's just, I'm so great and this is what I did. And that can be an introvert or an extrovert that's asking the good questions and listening. And sometimes it's the extrovert that just comes right up and, hey, how do I know you? And blah, blah, blah. And then ask the questions, right? But the other thing I heard someone say before is, you know, have a horseshoe, don't have a circle when you're standing around in a group. Mm-hmm. Like leave an opening for other people to feel like they can step into that group. Because when you've got a circle, it's hard for someone to kind of step into your conversation.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
See, writing something else down. That was
didn't come from me. I heard
really
it somewhere else.
I think that naturally happens, but that's okay. That's okay. Well, now I'm gonna just cite you. So that's how these things work.
Are you interested in offering virtual CFO services at your firm or scaling your existing service offerings? The Virtual CFO Playbook, How to Land $60,000 a Year Clients and Provide a Killer Client Experience, is an online series of modules that will equip you with essential tools for creating and delivering scalable VCFO services. These approaches have helped Summit CPA grow from $500,000 to upwards of $5 million in revenue over the past decade. If you're ready to grow your firm, visit summitcpa.net/VCFO Playbook to enroll now.
You know, what I thought was also interesting about your book in terms of, you know, you talked a lot about, and I can see how all this stuff kind of stacks on top of itself. But one of the other pieces were, you know, how to win over angry clients. Like what's that all about? How does that interlock with all of this stuff?
I think that comes back to that piece where it's easier to keep a client than to get a new one, right? So networking, getting new clients, building your business is all good, but if you can't keep the business once it comes in the door, you're just running on this hamster wheel all the time trying to bring new stuff in. And for me, that chapter about angry clients is really about A, keeping the business that you already have, and B, the idea that conflict is 99% preventable. Most of the conflicts you're going to have with clients are preventable, and they come from you, right? You've either not kept them in the loop, you haven't been responsive enough when they're not hearing from you, they don't know what's going on, their stress levels get high, they get anxiety, they don't know what's going on, they start imagining what might be happening, or it's the way that you're responding. Maybe they've criticized you and all of a sudden you're feeling defensive, and then that triggers that whole thing. But what I figured out is most of the times if clients are upset, they're actually afraid. They're not angry. There's something they are afraid of. I had this client one time that was she was just horrible. Like every time I call her, she would freak out. She'd yell. As a mortgage broker, I'm asking for documents. So I can I have your pay stub? You've got everything you need. Stop asking me for crap. Like just get this done, you know, and I'm trying to give her to someone else in the office. I'm like, someone else want this person. Before. And they're like, no, you got to fire her. Like you just got to let it go. And so I went to make that call to fire her, and I kind of blurted it all out, and your docs will be at the front. And then and then I waited because I'm like, okay, it's going to get bad now. Like she's really going to blast me. And there was nothing. And then oh my God, is she crying? Like, what the heck? Like, did I call her at a bad time? What happened? And I said, are you okay? And she says, I know I seem like a crazy person, but like I'm a single mom. I have 3 kids. My landlord told me I have to get out. I've been to 3 other mortgage brokers. They've already fired me. Nobody wants me. Now what am I supposed to do? And I was like, oh, she's not mad. She is terrified, right? She is terrified. She's going to lose her home. She has nowhere to live. She's not going to get this done. And so then this is where the question part comes in, right? Then I had to ask the questions that I hadn't asked before. And I said, well, can you get me those documents then? She said, no. I'm like, you can't or you won't? Like, what's the deal? She said, I'm on probation. If I give you my pay stub, the lender's going to find out I'm on probation. They're not going to approve my mortgage. And I said, well, aren't you a nurse? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, here's the thing. If you work in healthcare, lenders do this thing called an exception. They know that you're always going to have a job anywhere you go. They don't care that you're on probation. We can get this done. And she said, well, it's not enough. I'm one income. I said, but you're paying like $2,600 a month in rent. You've got a perfect credit. You've never missed a payment. What's the problem? Like, and she said, and sorry, I'm getting off track here. But anyways, I dug in. I asked a bunch of questions. I found out she has child support. She's got this great job. She's on like there's all these other sources of income. Once we got past the fear, got past all the things she was holding back from me, we put it all together, got it approved. She's like my favorite client ever. Like she's been back to me 3-4 times. She refers her friends to me. We have this great relationship. But if I had just stopped with, that's it, I'm never going to deal with you again, you're a crazy person, I never would have got to reap the benefits of what could have been a great relationship. I had to like ask more questions and find out what was going on, get her past her fear, because once her fear went away, their anger went away, right? And that's a client for life.
That's what I was gonna say. That sounds so familiar.
You hear that, Jamie? Yeah, I think we're I think as an industry, and I mean, and I think the buzzwords around really these days are just like fire the jerks, and a lot of times whenever we have difficult clients, I wouldn't say mean people that are maybe angry because they're terrified or whatever. I know a lot of times they fall on my lap. People are like, oh, give them to Adam, and it's because exactly what you just said. Most of the time, people are just there's a lot of anxiety. They're telling themselves stories. They have a lot of other challenges going on. And if you can confront those and talk to them and just call them out, like I literally right before our call right now, I almost fired a client. I got on the call and I told him I was going to fire him, and I told him exactly why I was going to fire him. And he did pretty much kind of the same thing. He explained why he felt the way he did. And I said, well, that's fine. I get it, and this is how we have to work through this forward. And we have a great relationship. It's just like at a certain point, things have to change, and you have to get to the bottom and the root of things. And I think that so many times we pass each other as service businesses, we pass each other in the night so much that it's easy to take an email the wrong way or a conversation and get really snippy with each other and not really humanize what's going on. And so what I heard you just say is like, don't get me wrong, there's difference between somebody that's, a bit of a cancer and somebody that's just angry, but you got to dig into what that anger is. And sometimes it's because we messed up, right? Maybe you asked for the documents 5 times. I hear that a lot. You know what I mean? The same documents. And it's like, I've given them to you. Okay, I get it. But I don't know. I guess what I really connected with and I thought was cool there was just that different perspective of, looking at their anger and trying to see what's behind it first to make sure that it's not just a bad fit or a bad person, but, maybe if there's something underlining there that you can address and solve, then, like you said,
and sometimes it is someone who's just a jerk, but you don't know until you ask the questions, and you don't know until you have that real hard conversation, right? And yeah, sometimes you uncover something that you actually did wrong that would help you make your process better, or a misunderstanding or a way that you communicated something. Like if I had told her why I needed those documents, or if I had explained a whole bunch of stuff, we probably never would have got there. So again, it came back to me, right? Like I want to blame her, but ultimately I probably started the process of her being stressed out and angry through something that I did or I neglected.
I think the big thing there is, especially when you're where Adam and I are at. So a lot of times Adam and I are like the second conversation, right? So we're the elevated. Okay, we're getting to the point where we're bringing this upstream, and so that, a lot of times the first question you try to ask the client server is, okay, so let's be honest with ourselves. Like, is there anything here we did wrong? And a lot of times, like, oh yeah, I'm probably not communicating well enough, which is what you mentioned, which is perfect. And so I think that, every time you look at it honestly and you put yourself in their shoes, it makes it a lot easier to get to the solve and get to the place where we can make this work. Because oftentimes you don't want to just lose a client, especially in our business where it's recurring. We hope our clients are going to stay with us for 5 years, 10 years. We don't want our clients to leave after 6 months, especially when it's just a misunderstanding or when it's something that we can easily fix. And so I think you're a great point there, and I'm really excited now because Adam and I are working on a book club for our team, and I think this definitely needs to fall in there, because exactly what you said is I think what our team needs to do a better job of is making sure they say, okay, what could I have done better here, or what question did I not ask that could really get to the root of this.
Yeah, because it's never one client, right? When you lose one client, you actually don't just lose that client, you lose all the referrals in the future that they will send you. Yeah.
Great. So we are right at the edge of time here. So I think it's a good ending point now that we're you're going to sell a couple more books, because we're going to sell it to our team. So that's exciting for you. But I'd like to end our podcast with giving both you guys a chance for one final thought. And we'll start with you, Monica.
Yeah, one thing I was just going to touch on there, I didn't. So we're talking about clients being jerks. One thing I tell everyone too is one of the easiest ways that you can grow your business is just don't be a jerk yourself. Like when you go to McDonald's and you're freaking out at that kid because they gave you the wrong order, like they're going to go home and talk to their parents about it. Or, you're at your chiropractor. Like that's all those people are potential clients, their family, their friends are potential clients. So, don't be a jerk. If you're meeting jerks all day long, you're probably the jerk. So that's
great.
My
great
little
final thought.
tidbit.
How about you, Adam?
Yeah.
That's why you want to look average like me and drive like a 2002 Honda Accord that's like gray, so you're not memorable at all. You don't want to have that like lime green car that everybody's like, yeah, that's that jerk. No, that would not be my takeaway. No, I just appreciate the conversation and the perspective. I think that it's good just sometimes to take inventory of being intentional with making human connections, and I think you spoke into all the benefits of that, not only just on the front end of acquiring clients, but also on the back end of keeping them, which I think is also just as important. So, I just appreciate the conversation and the perspective, and giving us a chance to kind of think through that stuff a little bit,
thanks
to be a little bit more intentional.
And for great questions too, and great listening skills. As long as we're talking about all those things,
Awesome.
I really
thank you,
enjoyed
Adam.
my time.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you to our listeners. This will be a good episode for us. Thank you.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.